Hi everyone, this is Scott Swanay with Fantasy Baseball Sherpa, and I'm here today with a 2012 preview of the Chicago Cubs hitters. Chicago's going to be one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball this year, but fortunately for them, they play in the NL Central. That means that they're in the same division as the Houston Astros and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are also going to contend for the title of worst team in baseball this year. So the Cubs could finish anywhere from 4th to 6th in that division, the division that I think the Cincinnati Reds are going to win, with St. Louis and Milwaukee as also Rans. I figure Chicago will probably win just over 70 games. I have them projected for a record of 72 and 90 this year. The big problem with the Cubs, their pitching is below average, but the real problem is their inability to score runs. Their offense is one of the worst in the game, and I think that's, unfortunately for them, going to continue to be the case this year. The Cubs still do have several viable mixed league options, and they start with shortstop Starlin Castro. Now, Castro, as you may have read, had some off the field problems this offseason, so maybe he should look into hiring Josh Hamilton's former chaperone. I hear he's available. For Castro, you can look at him as somebody that'll hit it for a 295 average, probably 5 to 10 home runs, 65 runs batted in, and he'll steal 25 bases for you. The next name on the Cubs mixed league options is a name that will probably surprise you a bit, and that's Bryan LaHair. He's a rookie. He's kind of old for a rookie, but he can definitely hit well enough to stay in the lineup every day. He'll initially be eligible only in the outfield, but since he's going to be the Cubs' everyday first baseman to start the season, depending on how many games at a new position it takes for a player to become eligible at that new position in your league, he could become first base eligible for you within the first few weeks of the season. I see LaHair as somebody that could hit for 280 average with 20 home runs and 80 RBIs, which would be really useful, maybe stats for a fifth outfielder in a mixed league. Giovanni Soto is still a decent catching option in mixed leagues. Unfortunately, he's like Miguel Montero without the batting average, the high batting average. Look for Soto to hit for maybe a 245 average, and to go with that 20 home runs and 60 runs batted in if he can stay healthy for the whole season. The Cubs do have a bunch of NL-only options, starting with outfielder Alfonso Soriano, who used to be one of the best mixed league options in baseball, but times have changed. Soriano no longer steals bases, and he doesn't hit for average anymore, so other than his power, he doesn't really provide much fantasy value. Also, there's a good chance he'll be traded at some point during this season to make way for some of the Cubs' younger players, and if he does get traded, it's most likely going to be to an American League team that would use him either as a full-time or a part-time DH. So if you're in an NL-only league where you lose the player if he's traded to the American League, be very wary of taking Soriano for your team. I see Soriano as someone that will hit for a 250 average over the course of the season, hit 25 home runs, and drive in 85 runs. Marlon Byrd is another Cubs outfielder who's an NL-only option. He does a little bit of everything, but nothing particularly well. He's also a trade candidate, but unlike Soriano, if he is traded, there's a chance he could stay in the National League, so you don't have quite the same risk there that you do with Soriano. Byrd, I'm projecting for a 285 average, 10 home runs, 55 runs batted in, and 5 stolen bases. David DeJesus is the final Cubs outfielder who would make for a decent NL-only option. He's a slightly worse version of Marlon Byrd in that I don't think he'll hit for as high a batting average. Look for him to hit about 10 points lower, so pencil him in for a 275 batting average to go with the same 10 home runs and 55 runs batted in and 5 stolen bases. Ian Stewart is a very intriguing corner infield option. You may recall in Colorado it always seemed like he was on the verge of being the everyday third baseman there, but whenever he got the opportunity, he either didn't play well or he got injured. Now in Chicago, he doesn't figure to have much competition at the third base spot since the Cubs lost Aramis Ramirez over the winter when he signed as a free agent with the Milwaukee Brewers. So if Stewart is able to hit for a decent average, he could really be even a mixed league contributor. Unfortunately, I don't think that he is going to hit for a high average. I think Maybe a 235 average is what I would forecast for him. 20 home runs, 65 runs batted in, and 5 stolen bases. However, since the Cubs offense is so anemic, there's a good chance that Stewart stays in the everyday lineup even with a paltry batting average. Darwin Barney is a middle infield option in NL-only leagues. There's really not much to say about him. He's a very nondescript player. He doesn't do anything particularly well. No power. He'll hit fewer than 5 home runs over the course of the season, drive in 45 runs, and steal 10 bases. So really nothing special there. Finally, if you're in a 2-catcher NL-only league, you should take a look at Wellington Castillo. He's really like a mini Gio Soto. He's not going to hit for average, but will provide some power. I see for him a 240 average, 5 home runs, and 20 RBIs in part-time duty for the Cubs. Several other players worth mentioning for the Cubs. Brett Jackson is a highly touted outfielder who may and probably will come up at some point during the season. Problem is he's not going to hit for a very high average because he strikes out too often. If he hits for a 250, 255 average, consider yourself lucky. There is power and speed to go with that, but again, his average will probably work against him, and I would stay away from him as an NL-only fantasy option. Anthony Rizzo came over in the winter in a trade for Andrew Cashman. He is going to get a chance to be the Cubs' everyday first baseman at some point, but if it's in 2012, it's likely not to be until later in the season. So I wouldn't use more than a bench spot in an NL-only league for Rizzo. You may recall when he had his cup of coffee with the Padres last year, he couldn't hit for average, but he does have a track record of doing so in the minor leagues, so I wouldn't be afraid to speculate on him with a bench spot. Finally, Jeff Baker is an infielder who really is a stopgap measure for fantasy teams. The good thing about him is he's eligible at middle infielder and corner infielder by virtue of being eligible at first base and second base. But again, he really doesn't get much playing time, and when he does, he doesn't do much with it, so his position versatility is offset by the fact that he really doesn't do anything when he is in the lineup. So again, I'm Scott Swanay with FantasyBaseballSherpa.com. Please check us out. We have customizable player rankings and projections for over 700 players, and they're updated constantly throughout spring training, right up through opening day. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, you can do that. We're at fantasy_Sherpa on Twitter. And finally, this is Scott Swanay again with Fantasy Baseball Sherpa signing off, and we'll see you next time.